to ensure the red button's on, because we're trying to, until we get a Zoom, we're working on getting a Zoom mic to put on the tables to be a little bit better, but.
Definitely don't put that in front of me.
And then if you are speaking, you're a primary speaker, if you could just make sure that you're bringing it a little bit closer to you, and we'll try to do the best we can what we have for the streaming. So, what time is it? All right, 6:01. So call to order at 6:01, and I'll ask Raquel to call the roll.
Ms. Murray.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes. So I'll confess that I've had zero time. I've been out in Ohio at the ICMA conference all week, and so I didn't have a chance to aggregate everything. I promise, by next meeting, we'll have them ready for posting, or at least approval, and then posting shortly thereafter. If anything's approaching the mark of the 30 days, I'll make sure to get a draft posted prior to, so at least we have something up for the community. All right? And Raquel, I will, whatever I come up with as far as a template to slot those into, I'll just ship over to you, and you can use that going forward. All right. So new business items, moving on. So public correspondence, and I'll kick this to Kate. Just so everyone knows, you know, obviously this, and for the public, we have a SBC email account. People are welcome to submit to that main email account, which goes to myself and also Kate. Still working out some of the kinks. Kate and I spoke, and you know, she can elaborate a little bit more, but on the thinking of maybe pushing these out to the entire committee, so they're well equipped when they come to the meetings, prepared to respond to any comments. So Kate?
So I did put them together, and I did actually send them out to the full committee, but like this afternoon. So I don't expect anybody has looked at them, because I will apologize. It was a last minute. We have a lot of things we're juggling in life, so I apologize. But I will say, we did receive, so there was one email, it was just, it was community members asking if they could attend. And Luke actually replied back to it for that particular one, basically saying, yes, they're public meetings, and welcoming anyone to come along. We received a correspondence from, my old lady glasses, Doral Beasley. He had sent latest Mass school construction costs, and so there was an email detailing that, along with some data revolving around Massachusetts renovations. And then we have another one from Mr. Beasley. He had corresponded with some folks regarding the November bond referendum up at RIDE. And he received some communication back from them, so that was included. And we have a concerned community member, a parent, who had emailed us back early September, Miss O'Sullivan, basically giving her thoughts over the initial JADE report, and just kind of, again, went through some of her thoughts on that. I'm not going to read them out loud at the moment. Mr. Beasley did send another one that I forwarded. That one had some attachments, and I want to make sure that I acknowledge exactly what he sent. So that was, he sent to our town manager and all our legislators about school construction bonds. He was specifically addressing Representative Potter. And again, he went into some detail and sent along some, it was regarding cost. And so that was forwarded to the rest of the committee. But as I said, most people did not have time to review. So we might want to maybe bring it forward to next meeting if there are any topics that anybody wants to address from the correspondence we received.
Does anybody have any thoughts, comments on what was sent out? At least we know it was short notice, but The one thing I will call attention to is there was a correspondence from Doral Beasley to RIDE, I believe, and it was with regard to the upcoming bond that is scheduled, asking about the extension of timelines. And I know this is something that he's iterated in past meetings about, that legislation may have an extension of timelines, would give us a reprieve if we wanted to push out our timelines. And he did receive a response back saying that was not the case, that there was no timeline extension on that. So that essentially keeps us on task because, and obviously that doesn't say even if it was extended, we wouldn't be on task because that's still pending approval. But we don't have any other mission right now. We're on the timeline we're on, and we'll keep charging towards that. But he did send some good information. I urged the committee members to look through it and come back next meeting prepared. We'll move on to chairperson's report. So I haven't had a lot of time to do much else other than the conference while I was in Ohio. However, I will say that Brian, and you'll see tonight, I did ask him to put together some information at a high level for the committee to go over. I haven't had a chance to reach back out to Mario on the facility condition index, but we do have it on the agenda tonight to discuss further. And I would like to make a motion tonight to add one item to the agenda because Phil Conte from Studio Jade contacted myself and Kate today saying that he had a presentation he'd like to present. We both agreed that it was content we feel it should be shared with the committee. And it has to do with the projects as a total and then also some of the financing, which will tie into Brian's presentation. So Brian would present first. So I'd ask that we consider a motion to include a presentation and discussion by Studio Jade regarding school facility options and funding scenarios. So I'm making that motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so we'll move that after Brian's update, which will be under item 5. So that'll be on new item 6. I have nothing else to report, so we'll go ahead and move on to the item number 5, which is discussion of school building project financing to include general overview of financing at various bond debt levels and related impacts on town school capital and operating budgets, balancing desired facility outcomes with long and short-term financial implications, and setting a general project cost range or options to be developed by Studio Jade. With that, I will turn it over to Brian. Brian?
Thank you. So I was going to do a brief overview on general obligation bonds and then run through and put a few scenarios on the screen to go over with everyone.
Let me just see if I can switch over.
Yep, okay. Okay. Excuse me. So general obligation bonds are direct obligation and pledge to the full faith and credit of the government entities. The bonds are generally issued as serial bonds with equal amounts of principal and interest maturing annually, with typical maturity range between 15 to 20 years, and can go up to 30 years.
Do you have anything to show?
Yes, I do.
Can you pull that up?
Oh, right now? Okay.
Yeah, just because the public's watching. That's
Okay.
what they're seeing.
Sorry. All right. State statute limits the amount of general obligation bonds, bonded debt a town can issue to 3% of the net assessed property value. However, all bonds approved through state enabling legislation and voter referendum are exempt from that limit. As of the town's most recent audit, dated June 30, 2021, the town had a debt limit of $157,377,415. Of the town's existing debt at that point of $12,077,152 in debt and bonded indebtedness, $2,669,751 are actually subject to the debt limit. The balance is not, as it was passed through voter or through a referendum. So that leaves a balance at that time of $154 million under the existing cap. And finally, as of the most recent certified roll, as of December 31st, 2021, the town's new debt limit is $210,606,803. In the current fiscal year, the town has principal debt payments on the books of $1,433,000 and interest payments of $511,531, and total debt outstanding of $14,753,000. Sure. $14,753,000.
So that's a lot of information.
I know,
You
yes.
rattled off there.
Yeah, yeah.
You walk through it a little.
Absolutely.
Like, what we need is,
Yes. Yep, I was gonna go through each, but I can. This is the, here's, oh, you mean, oh, size one. I thought you meant, gotcha.
not everyone has their glasses.
Yeah, oh, no, I'd be one of them, okay.
The blind can lead the blind.
So one thing to note on that, I know I mentioned at one point, the debt outstanding against our cap right now is the $12,077,000, but our balance as of the end of this fiscal year will be the $14,753,000. That's due to the town issuing just about $7 million in FY '22, but also we're still paying down debt, so that's where you get to that number. In terms of I think I mentioned the debt limit raising to 210 million. That is, again, the town's current property tax total assessed value within the current roll is $7,020,226,779. That times the 3% is where you arrive at the 210 million. I don't know if you wanted me to go over anything else that I said, or just go over.
So just to back up, so
Yeah.
210 million overall.
Yes.
What do we have available again? Round numbers.
As of the 21 audit, it was 154 million.
Okay. That's what I thought I registered.
Yeah.
All right.
That was when the cap was 157 million. It's now going up to 210, so it'll be,
Okay, so that's not the number. What's
right.
the number?
The new number is over 200 million. I don't have the final numbers yet, but it will be over 200 million.
So 200 million-ish.
Yes. And this again, given it's going to be done through voter referendum, it won't be subject to that limit as well. So that won't be. Yes. Yes.
It's not subject? I wasn't
No.
aware of that.
Yeah. If it has state enabling legislation and it was passed by a voter referendum, it's not subject to the 3%.
Ryan, go over that again, because
Yes.
I'm hearing bits and pieces.
Sorry. Yes. So, any debt that a city or town takes on that is done through enabling legislation at the state and through a voter referendum is not subject to your 3% tax limit, debt limit, which this would not be subject to that. I believe that's the plan.
Okay. As Dave said, there's a reason for that.
Yes.
They don't want to see towns going to too far
Absolutely.
debt.
Yes.
We're very lucky in SK that we haven't incurred a lot of debt.
Mm-hmm.
The downside of that is we don't have a lot of debt to fall off.
That's correct.
To be able to pay a new bond. So a lot of towns roll one bond to the next. We just don't have that opportunity here. So whatever is coming up is likely that we're going to bear the full brunt, correct?
Yes. By 2025, we're going to have our debt service payments will be lowered by just under 302,000. We have a little bit coming off. By 2027, we'll have our debt payments down by 661,000. So we got a little bit coming off, but not substantial.
So you just want to walk,
Correct.
does anybody have any questions of Brian at this point? So Brian, could you just walk us at a high level, right?
Yep.
What scenarios mean? You see a 52.5 because that would be our expected maximum bonus,
That's correct.
right? And then, so just walk us through a little bit on some of these scenarios.
Sure. So what's in front of you here is a estimated bond issuance of $85 million. This is assuming a rate of ride reimbursement of 52.5%, which is the cap that we can achieve. This is assuming at this time an estimated interest rate of 4.25%. The total principal and interest payments would be $127,569,000. of which the total annual average annual payment would be 6.3 million. Of that amount, the town would receive an estimated average annual amount from ride reimbursements of 3.3 million, which would result in the town taking on additional debt service payments on average of $3,029,775. Over the course of the debt, I'm sorry, let me slide it down, you can't really see the bottom there, but over the course of the term of the bond, again, as I mentioned, $127 million would be paid back. The town's contribution of this would be $60,595,000. That represents 47.5% of the total payments on this bond. That's correct.
So basically, that's almost split.
Yes, yes.
Total obligation, and you're running this on a 10-year?
That is a 20-year. That's right, 20-year. Did you run it on 30-year? I did not. I actually, I did, I just don't have that ready at this time. I do actually have that. That's the norm. It's the norm for general obligation debt. I mean, on smaller debt, they can go 15 years. On larger debt, you can go 30, but the norm is typically 20. But we can certainly do 30. Yes.
I think it's worth putting it.
And just to set the tone, and I should have said this earlier, right? The intent of this is to give the building committee the framework of what we're looking at. This is ultimately a council decision based on the projects we have and what the debt they want to incur. Philly is responsible for the town. So, while we can certainly ask questions in the weeds, just for the community, I want to make sure that this is not the place to make this decision. That's all. Correct. This is framework.
Yes. Yep. And you can, there are many different options in terms of you can issue it half up front, not up front, half, and then maybe a couple years later issue the rest. You don't have to issue it all at once. You could do interest only for a year or two. There are a lot of different areas, once as we get closer to actually issuing the debt, to kind of phase it in that you can do.
You can hear, but
Just for folks to have a general idea, based on our current tax goals, what does that debt look like in terms of the tax increase, percentage-wise?
That would. So the 85 million would result, again, I'm looking, this would be as if the debt would be issued this year, so I'm going off current levy. Correct, 4.25. This would result in a increase in the levy of 44 cents. Correct.
I think that's just a key, like, side number to have, is these numbers a lot of taxpayers aren't
Sure.
but to put it more in here.
Yes.
good point. And also, as you said, there's ways to roll that in over here. So it might be 10 cents one year,
Exactly.
20 cents another year.
Yes.
Depending on where we ramp up. So that's strategy.
Also, there's when debt comes off as well.
Yes. That's correct. That's correct. So I did 85, 100, 125, and 150. This would be the 100 scenario. For all, I should say, for all these scenarios, the ride reimbursement has remained the same at assuming 52.5%, and the assumed interest rate of 4.25% will remain the same on all of these. So on this scenario, again, and I'm sorry, I should say that as well. On each of them, it's a 20-year term assumed for amortization. So on this one, the total payments, principal and interest, are estimated at $150,081,735. That would result in an average annual payment of $7.5 million. Of that, the town would receive an estimated $3.9 million from the state as ride reimbursement, and the town would be responsible for the balance at $3.5 million. Once again, this would represent the town funding 47.5% of the total. That would be the payback on this, which is, again, $150 million, 81,000. The town would be paying back 47.5%, and that, again, is the, down at the bottom, that 71,288,824 over the 20 years.
What would the impact be on the tax rate?
That would be, again, estimated and going off of the current levy, 52 cents.
So I know Kate brought that up, that's a very, that is a number everyone really
Yes.
sees, right? So just using that, 52 cents, it helps us with $500,000.
Mhm. I actually, if you like, I talked to Mark.
About 200, so if someone has a house value of $500,000, it's about $260 a year, right?
I talked to our assessor, and he told me the median household income, household value is $425,000. So I do have that, and based on 425, the projected increase would be $221.
Per year for that time.
Yes, yes.
That's for the year.
That, the year, correct.
I think that number, anytime I've tried to do a projection on anything with this type of stuff, that's the number.
Mhm.
These numbers are great to know.
Yep,
I
yep.
don't know if it's gonna cost them $2,000 a year extra or $220. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Correct.
I think it's all important. I'm just saying, that's very important, what you brought up, but it's like borrowing money on your house, right? You paid a little early, you get an extra payment, this way you got left. I'm just saying, that number though is the one everyone keys in on. How much is the average person gonna pay?
Yes.
People in their head are saying, okay, my house is worth 600, so I'll pay this. My house is worth 700, I'll pay this.
Going back to that then, I'm sorry. Backing up then on the 85 million, that would have sent, on, again, the median household, 425, that would have been resulted in a projected increase of $187. Yes. And this is a scenario at 125 million. Excuse me, total payments on the 125 million would be 187 million. Slide it down, I can't really get everything on there, but that's okay. So the total debt service over the term would be 187 million, 602,000. Annual payments on this bond, on average, would be 9.3 million. The town would receive state aid in the amount of 4.9 million annually, and the town would be responsible for the balance of the annual debt service payments, which would be 4.4 million. Again, the town would be responsible for 47.5% of the total debt service on this bond, and that would be equate to 89,111,000. And on this scenario, this would impact the tax rate on the current levy by an increase of 66 cents, and would impact, impact the homeowners with the value of the 425 at an amount of $280.50. And finally, I did a scenario at 150,000, I'm sorry, 150 million. Wouldn't do it, huh? Okay, at the 150 million, the total debt service payments would equate to 225,122,000. This would mean annual payments in debt service of 11,256,000. That is again principal and interest. The town would receive state aid in the amount of 5.9 million, and the town would have debt service payments annually of 5.3 million. Of the 225 million that the town would take on and pay, that would have to be paid back as part of this debt, the town would have principal and interest payments of 106 million, or again, 47.5%. Under this scenario, the levy would increase by 79 cents, and that would be an increase to the median household value of $335.75 per year.
I'm assuming, do you roll this up for the committee so we can send it out to give them the high level? I don't think we need the amortization schedule.
Okay.
I think what would be helpful is those top lines and the bottom, like everything I probably just wrote down, which is, yeah, just a table, I think would be helpful. Does anybody have any general comments, questions, or discussion at this point? Yeah.
I was talking
We could use that one. That would've been helpful.
I was going to get to it.
All right. I stole your thunder. Wow, you're efficient. So I thought it was important to have this general discussion, or at least thought session, on seeing what this looks like. We talk in terms of 85 million, is it 100 million, like what does that actually mean? And I think town manager and Dave and Kate are all right, like this is what it comes down to for the taxpayer. And just to put ourselves in the shoes of council for a moment to say, this is what they're gonna be facing, right? Beyond the project, and we're gonna think our project's the best thing since sliced bread, but ultimately it's gotta be paid for. So thinking about the left and right limits of our equation here to, tell Phil, hey, here's where we want these options to fall. Is it above this limit? Is it below this limit? Is it within this frames that we're setting forth? So I'll leave it to the committee for any thoughts at this point. You're all just shocked.
One thing I'll point out is that, of these scenarios, we're starting at 85 million. That was the referendum value, which at the time was discussed as being a high end for some folks. I think that was only maybe one of the reasons folks voted against it. I think the majority of what you were getting for that 85 million was a bigger factor. So I think 85 million for the right project, or 150 million for the right project is palatable to the community. Provided we have that good, better, best scenario and run through those different scenarios with Jade. But I think we might want to have an option 0.9 that is maybe less than 85 million when we present this to the public on our website. Maybe we have something less than 85, 250. You can't buy much with $50 million, Dave, but I just think it's, if we're starting where we were before, I think we're kind of being a little ambitious maybe to some extent.
So, Dave, I agree, and this, Brian and I have been talking about this for about a month now, 6 weeks, and I had you give a range from 50 to 150, just to show, here's what it is, not being committed at any number. I think once we determine what the need is, what we determine what the vision is, then the number will fall into place, it is what it is. I agree.
Present this, I think people are going to make.
I agree.
already jumping.
Yeah, I agree 100%. People already looked at 85 saying, okay, we started, remember Brian, at 50, with that table you gave me about 6 weeks ago? We started at that and go all the way up to the 150, and there's the broad range.
75.
That's exactly what we did, all the way up to 150.
To repeat that, I was like, if we can also get 20, 25, 30, just so we can get a holistic view on what. And then I guess the big question is, what is real, what is reasonable and real and feasible for the community? Is it between 50 and 85? Is it between 125 and 150? Like, what are our guardrails so that we aren't spinning each other's wheels, that we're actually, we have a tight timeline, we want to give some solid guidance, and so what's real versus what is nice.
Mark, did you have a comment?
I personally, this is my personal opinion, I just don't like putting a number out there saying, okay, town can afford 85 million, can afford 120 million, 50 million. Let's truly pull out a thought, I know we are, of what the need is, what will best serve our students and our residents, and then the number will fall where it is, and then if we have to make adjustments, you make them either way.
Yeah, I guess one thing I looked at this, I see option 1, 2, 3, 4, and these could translate to options that go with those numbers, right? So we could have 4 or 5 options. We could have the committee's preferred, right? This is the one that we think is the sweet spot. But also, for like if I'm picturing myself as a decision maker on council, I need the project and the cost, right? What am I getting for my bang for my buck? And that's also the reimbursements playing into that, which I do have a question on that in a minute. But so I do, part of the reason for this framework discussion is Phil's going to have a bunch of different options too, is what does the committee want to slot as far as our options with those associative numbers? And then what kind of gets brought forward is saying, okay, we need additional guidance, because at some point, we don't want to drop something also on the council that is just not palatable cost-wise, and then it just gets kicked back. At least if we can give them a few different options, go back and say, give us some guidance. Here's what we think is our preferred, but do you see it differently? That gives us some more rails to work on. We can whittle it down and get to a final project. On the financing, I'm sorry. Did you calc in the PAYGO funding? Because that changes the equation a little bit.
So I didn't at this point.
Okay, so that'll actually look better
It will.
for
I
us.
just don't know at this point what we'd be getting for PAYGO, so that's early.
We get a 15%, just so everyone knows, and we may know this already, but we get a 15% PAYGO up front. We still have to put that up front as well. We have to match that. But that softens the impact on the bond amortization, so we'll actually pay less.
So is this for, hypothetically speaking, if 85 million is, or 50 million or 75, pick any hypothetical up there, how many projects is that? One project? 2 projects? Is that total for all projects?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's where we're going to have Phil weigh in and say, this is what you could do for 50 million. Here's a few at 50 million, and then we would have to define what would be the preferred in those categories. I don't know, Phil, and you're going to be presenting, so maybe you can lend some into that.
So if you think about what was some of the suggestions from our last meeting, where people were like, think future out. If we're going to have collapse to 2 elementaries, for example, one at each end of town, think future out. If we're going to just have one middle school with 600-700 kids, think future out, right? 85 million for all those projects? I mean, we'd have to figure out that scope of work, too, that framework, I guess. Let's use that term, because that's the term we use so far, and I think it's a more appropriate term. We'd have to figure out what that framework is, realistically. And it doesn't, like we talked about, just as we can stagger the debt, we can also stagger the projects as well. So it's something else to think about as we build out this framework.
That's a good point. Let me just switch off here.
I think it's important to add one other piece of information that probably should go with that, which is the proposed education plan, which hasn't been shared yet. It's in its final draft and getting summarized and having folks look at it. I think it may be beneficial to release those 2 items at the same time, so people have an understanding of, okay, here's some potential debt scenarios, but here's our potential educational scenarios based on this.
Return on investment.
Similar to a return on investment, yeah. It at least gives a story to tell with numbers, and then you can decide, okay, that's a great war and peace, but we really want Huck Finn, and that's only, 75 million versus 150 million. So, I don't know if you can delay.
totally agree, Mark. I mean, this is going to come down to a cost-benefit analysis, and we're going to have to look at both sides, and as Luke said, find that sweet spot. It's not really, we're going to recommend a sweet spot. It's up to the council to decide, you know, the council and the school committee to decide what they're willing to put forward to the voters. Our job is to put together a couple of different scenarios that hit that good, better, best, and let the cost benefit fall where it is, but we definitely have to include the educational side. That's, believe me, we can't forget that. That's the whole reason we're doing this. I mean, we're not talking about a coat of paint here. We're talking about some programmatic issues.
Right, that's the driver of the design, right?
Right.
And then
Start with the program.
start with the program and go from there. I think my caution here is if we just put out numbers, people latch on the numbers, rightfully so, right? But if they're latching on the numbers and saying, yeah, but you know what, for an additional 55 cents or 160 bucks, we're gonna get all this, and that's great for the kids, and that's great for the community. That 160 bucks divided by 4 quarters might be well worth the investment.
Still getting used to this. So, did anybody else have any further comment or question?
I just have a question, a procedural question on how we want, before we, in the past few meetings, we were letting community members speak in between, or do we want to actually hold off? Like, how do we want to? We don't
So,
have that many people here, so.
right, I know. So I guess, since it was a fairly substantial conversation, I'll entertain a brief, and I'll say as far as community comment, when it's on one of the discussion topics, I am going to limit it to that specific topic. So if you want to talk about financing and have questions regarding what Brian just presented, please keep it to that. There is an open public at the end where we can certainly discuss more, but the key is that this is a business meeting, and I just want to give the committee enough time to have discussion on the business. So at this time, I'll entertain a brief comment on anything that Brian just presented, or questions. If you could come up to the mic, just so everyone can hear you.
So just in regards to what you were talking about, there's a relatively simple way to do this. I did actually work in the construction industry, and we do this all the time, is you would assess the need from a full picture level, the whole thing, and you'd assign ROM values to each one. And then you'd create a column for school need priority and town need priority, and label them like 1 through 9, being like 1 being the most important, 9 being the least important. And then you can kind of see a tableized format to it with a cost for each. And then you can kind of give the public and the council the full picture scenario. If you want to go all in, you're at 150 million. If you want to go half in, you're at this level. And then you can pick based on priority of projects so that you get the most in need first. And then, like you had said, you can stagger it too. So maybe year 1, you do the top 5 tier, year 3, you do the further on down the road. That's all.
Thank you.
Build that into your bond.
Anybody else? If not, we'll. Doral?
Doral Beasley. So, I came in a few minutes late, but I think what I heard was the town has a debt service limit of $200 million. Is that somewhere in that figure?
That's correct.
Right, so in the case of the example for the 150 million that you gave, where the town share would be, I think, 106 million. So that, right, so that would leave like 94 million still, correct?
The debt limit is based on the total debt issuance. So even though the state would be paying for 52% of it, 52.5% of it, the full board would go against, well, this debt would not be subject to the debt limit, but if it were to be, it would be the full amount. It wouldn't be the total debt minus what we'd be receiving from RIDE.
But even though they're guaranteeing that that's going to get paid, we're on the hook for it?
Yes.
Yeah, Darrell, this came up where I last chaired in Coventry, and part of the discussion was that it was going to chew up the entire amount of their bonding capacity. So they'd have nothing left for, so I think that's part of the discussion needs to be had with council is, you know, there is other potential debt you want to take on as a town. What is the sweet spot?
Right. One of the things I hope when Mr. Conte presents his different scenarios is that they'll go from like the minimum to a maximum, because that's one thing we didn't get the first time. Those four options that we were given in the prior attempt to do this was in no way, it didn't go the whole gamut of doing the least to doing the most. It was just these four specific options, take it or leave it, okay? When I've looked at other towns, when they went through this process, their consultant gave you a bigger range of what you can do, to little to more to most. And lastly, I have to go back to where the money is going to come from. If we have a school budget, this is not on Mr. Prince because he just got here, but we've accumulated this school budget over a decade plus.
Oral,
Okay,
I
hold on.
know what you're going to say. Listen, I got to cut you off. You know where I'm going with this. This isn't, if you have a question for Brian related to the specific presentation, but
Okay.
this isn't for the tangent.
I'll save that for the end.
Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, we'll move on to Phil's presentation. Phil, you're up.
Great, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I want to set the table before I go through this presentation. It's labeled initial potential capital planning options for discussion, and really the appropriate thing here is for me to present really a broad spectrum of projects that respond to the needs that we heard during the stage one process. I'm going to deliver a lot of information here that you should digest over the next week or so, generate questions yourself, the community, and then we could have some real in-depth discussion. I would not be surprised if we are unable to have any deep discussion on this, because it is a little on the intensive side, because we heard a number of needs during the stage one process, and we aggregated those needs and say, what range of projects could we present to you for discussion that would respond to those needs? For example, you will not see an option that says, close all of the elementary schools and middle school and just make a 2-school K-8 option. Okay, you will not see that as an option, because that's not what we heard in the stage one, that South Kingstown is going to drastically change its curriculum delivery method. Now, that may change, and that's what this process will reveal. But you will see options, for example, that would say, this answers a need to equity amongst the elementary schools, because we did hear that comment. So this is not all inclusive, it's not exhaustive, it's really meant for you just to see a broad range of project options. Now, I think it's important that I read these clarifications to you before we present these options. So So indulge me for a second here. The first note is that estimates and costs provided in this document are preliminary rough estimates only and will be further refined as the scope of work narrows and more information becomes available. So you will see numbers. Please recognize that caveat. The second point is that current construction market conditions do not align with RIDE funding formulas in the cost per square foot. We know that the RIDE School Building Authority is reviewing it. There's likely going to be changes. What we're presenting here is based on the current RIDE formulas, and from our current experience, we can tell you that that number is challenged right now with the current market conditions, such that the funding provided may not be sufficient to build the size of the building desired and/or the level of improvements. There are many municipalities right now that were approved for a certain square footage and dollar amount, and they are unable to reach that square footage amount because of the cost of construction. And although there are many little things you can fine-tune, the only way to save construction dollars significantly is to address the square footage. When we say the word renovations in this discussion, that includes both deferred maintenance and educational adequacy components. It is important to understand that there is flexibility in the cost of renovations. Renovation costs can be increased or reduced from the costs and the cost ranges that were presented. Last week when we met, I told you that we would be meeting with Brian Mahoney to look at the work that he has ongoing, what is on his priority list. We met this week, Monday, and we made it through about 3 of the buildings. It was a very valuable exercise, both for him and Studio Jade, so that when we come to you with more distilled options and we say that this school has deferred maintenance needs in this amount, we're confident that we are accurately representing that. When we say the word swing space in this discussion, that will refer to the relocation of staff and students during construction, either within an existing building or in another place or building on the same site or a completely different site. And lastly, this is a little bit of a spoiler alert for the option at Hazard Building. We're going to introduce the word teacher center. And if you want to know what a teacher center is, we're defining it here. The teacher center to be located in the Hazard Building, that's just one of the options you'll see, is a space provided for staff with a wealth of resources for teachers to use in support of education in the classroom. These may include such items as computers, printers, audiovisual resources, materials, tools, and the workspace necessary to create instructional materials such as bulletin boards, games, presentations, displays, etc. The Teacher Center may also provide an opportunity to use, work with, borrow instructional resources normally not available at the building level, etc. So that is a further topic for discussion, but I wanted to just go over those notes. So for reference, we think it's important to have a fast fact sheet on each school. It identifies the year that it was built, the grades that it has, current enrollment. You may suggest that we expand that. This fast fact sheet should maybe have the projected enrollment in maybe 5 or 10 years from the NESDEC report. It has the building size, the land use size, the LEA capacity, and then the utilization factor. And maybe these reference sheets should be included to identify what that LEA capacity and utilization factor are based on enrollment that may project 5 to 10 years. So these are things that are just coming to me as we're talking about this. But if you as a committee think this reference sheet is important, maybe it could be expanded to include other items like I just mentioned. So let's start, and again, this is a very high level, elementary school options. So new elementary schools. 1 new school replacing existing 3, 3 new schools replacing existing 3, one new school replacing Peacedale and renovations and additions to Matunic and West Kingston, 2 new schools replacing Matunic and West Kingston and renovations to Peacedale, or just assure existing elementary school space equity and to renovate all the schools. So we looked at each one in particular. This is elementary option 1A, 1 new school replacing 3 existing schools. And you see the assumptions that we've made. Total enrollment, the square footage that would be allowed by RIDE, the optimum site size, the allowance by RIDE per square foot, plus their student FF&E and technology, and estimated land cost. We assume $75,000 per acre. Is that appropriate for South Kingstown? So the results would be a building cost of $86 million, a land cost of maybe 1.5, and the total cost of 88.1. Now, before I go farther, every option that we have in here is based on this same criteria, so that you'll want to look at it at each interval. We identify advantages and disadvantages preliminarily for that option. For example, this one has consolidation of the elementary school students. It will give you a single HVAC plant to operate and maintain, energy savings, little funding will need it initially for maintenance based on this 1 new school that replaces all 3, staffing consolidation possibilities. What are the disadvantages? Finding an adequate site located centrally to support the entire student population, increased transportation costs and student bus time, the cost of a new building and site, and the loss of the neighborhood school feel. Now, we're not advocating for any of these options, but we wanted to provide a broad range for review. The next one, 1B, 3 new schools, replacing the 3 existing schools. Again, we run through the formula that talks about enrollment, size, the funding, any demolition cost, or in the previous one, land acquisition, what the results are from a total cost option. This one right now, again, all based on the RIDE funding formula, which we qualified as being challenged currently. This is $101 million. Again, advantages and disadvantages. And I don't want to go through all of these because I think it's important that you spend the time doing that. Option 1C for the elementary school, which is 1 new school, replacing Peacedale with renovations at Matunic and West Kingston. Total cost is in a range here because it includes renovations and addition costs to Matunic and West Kingston, 63 to 71 million. Again, the advantages and disadvantages. Option 1D, 2 new elementary schools replacing Matunic and West Kingston with renovations at Peacedale. Running through the assumptions and the results, that total cost is 61 to 64 million. Again, advantages and disadvantages. This is to renovate all the schools, and that is a range of about 23.5 to 34 million. Again, advantages and disadvantages. Middle school options, we have 2. Renovate Broad Rock within the existing shell, or renovate Broad Rock with additions.
Hey, Phil?
Yes.
I think Dave has, are we entertaining questions, Aaron, or?
Oh, certainly, feel free.
Thanks. I think you've got some great options there. I just want to add one more just to torture you. Renovation to Peacedale, and then renovations to either Matunic or West Kingston. So a 2-school option with renovations.
Understand? Noted. So middle school option 1, renovate Broad Rock within the existing shell. And if you recall, when we said the word renovate, that included deferred maintenance and educational adequacy. So at the middle school option 1, to renovate, it's about $8 million to $11 million. This happened to be one of the schools that Brian and I reviewed this week. So we will be able to even further define this dollar amount in the next round as we start to funnel down these options. Again, advantages and disadvantages. Option 2, renovate Broad Rock with additions. You'll see that we have a dollar amount there, but you'll also see that we note that additions are not necessary to house the student population. But again, we're responding to what we heard during the stage 1, and we wanted to be as exhaustive as possible. The total cost option here is between 13 to 16 million. So the high school options, we looked at two main options with sub-options underneath. First is a new high school on existing site, on Curtis Corner site, existing Curtis Corner building demolished, and on a different site, not currently owned. And we looked at renovating the high school, renovate within existing shell, or renovate with demolition and additions. So the high school option 1A, which is a new high school, on existing site. Again, we made these assumptions. The enrollment, based on the NESDEC report. The square footage that would be allowed by RIDE. I want to pause at this one for 1 second. We are proposing that we would achieve the 225 square feet per student. That only comes when you can demonstrate an integrated delivery method between CTE and your core academics. We were successful in doing this for Newport. I believe if necessary, we would be successful for doing it here. We have the RIDE allowance, which is its current allowance at $551 per square foot, plus the furniture and IT. And we're assuming right now a $25 per square foot demolition allowance. So the results of a new high school on existing site using current information and formula, cost of building would be $90.7 million, cost of demolition $5.9, an estimated swing space allowance of $2.5, which would give us a total cost option of $99 million. Again, we've noted advantages and disadvantages. Again, the energy savings, little funding needed initially for maintenance following the extensive work, the same site, which essentially located. It would bring a thoroughly planned layout, not something that has been piecemealed. And we're still investigating the options on what we can do at Hazard Field. Some of the disadvantages, the cost of a new building, and the requirement for probably up to 2 years of swing space, which could be housed at Curtis Corner. The high school option 1B, which is a new high school on the Curtis Corner site. Again, you see the assumptions that we've made are similar. The results is a total cost of $90.7 million for the building. The cost of demolition, $2.5, total cost of $93 million. Many of the same advantages, one of them being that swing space would not be required. Similar disadvantages, one of them being that this option was defeated in the previous referendum. So a new high school on a new site that's not currently owned, same assumptions. The results are about $93.4 million, very similar because what is offset between this and the previous option, the cost to demolish Curtis Corner at $2.5 million, we're assuming that you could grab 37 acres at $2.7 million. Very similar in cost, that's why the numbers are very similar. Again, the value of land is something that I would look to this committee to maybe provide some maybe additional reaction to if we were to explore these options of new sites. Option 1C, these are the advantages and disadvantages. Very similar to the previous options. High school option 2A, which is to renovate the existing school within the existing shell. So we've made these assumptions that the enrollment would be 703, and the results would be a range of about 46 million to 61 million. Advantages, we would achieve energy savings with replacing a significant amount of the equipment, which would result in little funding for maintenance immediately thereafter. There are a number of disadvantages. The building configuration essentially would be the same awkward configuration it is now. The building exterior would not change substantially. This would be a renovation of an occupied building, and it would require internal and/or site swing space, which may be less disruptive with some off-site swing space at Curtis Corner. I believe this is the last component. I do have a matrix at the end that summarizes all of this. This last option is to renovate the existing high school with demolition and additions. You see the assumptions that we've made on enrollment remain. We've allowed a demolition allowance of about $25 a square foot. We have a general idea of some of the worst areas of the building that we would recommend demolished. This gives you a cost range of about 89 to 102 million. Number of advantages and disadvantages, very similar. Oh, I apologize. We do have some hazard building options. And right now, it's to renovate this as administrative offices, include the teacher resource center that I described, and maybe use it for professional development.
If that was say that was something that we did, would that be reimbursable because it was being utilized for educating?
We would make the claim that it is being utilized for education as a teacher resource center. This building is not equipped for early childhood learning in any capacity. We would advocate on your behalf that it is school-related, the teacher resource center being a major component to that, and that's why we've introduced it here. That's not a guarantee. This is a discussion point with the school building authority. And this hazard building option where we would renovate as administrative offices, plus the teacher resource center, plus the teacher in-service training center, assuming renovations only at hazard, we're projecting a $4 to $5 million investment. And there are advantages and disadvantages with this option. We did want to look at the athletic field options. Replace the existing field completely at Curtis Corner with new track and turf field stadium. If the high school remains and the field cannot be relocated there due to hazard field restrictions, if the high school is moved to Curtis Corner, or if the high school is moved to a new site that has limited acreage where they would not be able to have on-site athletic facilities. Number 2, construct a new athletic field and stadium complex at a new site. If the high school moved to a new site that did have adequate field space. And number 3, provide upgraded fields where existing and/or new fields where space allows. So the athletic field option 1, renovate the existing field completely with new track and turf field stadium. We're assuming an 8-lane track, artificial field turf, home visitor bleachers, press box, team rooms, bathrooms, storage, concessions, and tickets. Cost range of that is about 10 to 12 million, including the demolition of Curtis Corner to accommodate the new field orientation. Advantages and disadvantages. Construct a new athletic field and stadium complex at a new site. Again, same assumptions, and results are 8 to 10 million. And last, upgrade fields where existing fields or new fields where space allows. This assumes the existing athletic fields and courts may require upgrades and additional athletic fields are needed or desired. And the cost option is about $1 million to $5 million. And this is not reimbursable, this particular option. That's why funding is available. And options and disadvantage and option. Lastly is a matrix of all of these options, which I encourage you to review at your leisure, come up with some questions, either yourselves, the community, and I'll certainly investigate additional scenarios. And I want to present this just as information for you to start your thinking as we try to funnel this down. Go ahead, yes.
Is it possible to go back to the first slide and have all the acreage and all that stuff on the screen?
Yes.
You don't have to do it now, just at some point.
Yes, I will.
when you're done with the
Sure.
presentation.
So the next steps, and I believe this is my last slide, yeah. We must understand that there's flexibility in these renovation numbers. Okay, this is just based off our deferred maintenance and what we've heard over the last several months. Our suggestions are to narrow down options to those that appear to present reasonable and doable facility and educational solutions. Narrow down options to those that may likely be supported by the majority of the community. And narrow down options to those that will likely be financially feasible, both in terms of bonding and in terms of overall individual homeowner tax burden. Very consistent with what you were just speaking of a moment ago. We will then further define and refine options chosen, starting to develop costs, and have certainly participated in developing the best approach going forward. So let me go back to the slide that we're calling the resource slide. Okay. Oh, I hit escape and it went black. On just up here, I'm fine on my computer. I can, let me unplug this and plug it back in. There you go, okay.
My kid's in there.
I have issues as well. Maybe not just the year built, but the most recent renovation. Because, well, some of the schools, you know, well, especially Peacedale, has had multiple renovations of the high school as well. And just to clarify my other option, it was you know, renovation to Peacedale, and I should say a renovation or a new school at either of the West Kingston or Matuna sites.
So you're looking for a two-school
Two
option
elementary
now?
school
So
options.
not leaving one alone?
Peacedale, and then one other larger school in place of those two. So you'd have to be at least an addition, if not a new school.
So, I have a couple of comments, but I'll allow the committee members to respond individually to the, any requests. Let me preface this by saying, this is a lot of information, and Kate and I got it at, 2 o'clock? So we realized that this was a lot to put on, but both Kate and I felt like it was appropriate to bring it, so committee members had time to really digest it over the next week, formulate questions, have a chance to respond tonight with anything you'd like Phil to explore or look at. The intent is not tonight to vote on anything or take any action, it's just really to kind of absorb it, So with that, I'll open it up. Any committee members who have any additional requests of Phil or comments? Jim?
Yes. I will go back and get more information to better understand what that 105 acres is.
I believe I looked at it on GIS. It's a big site, but there's some splintering of the site with wetlands and other. So a lot of it is, yeah, it's undevelopable. Yeah, that's the difficulty but we can have the GIS person also give us some restrictions or anything on the deed, so. Any others? Chip?
Now that we're into the 22-23 school year, does it make sense? We have a pretty good idea what our enrollments are right now. Does it make sense for us to put the 22-23 enrollment numbers up there instead of 21-22?
Oh, definitely, sure. I mean, the more current information, the better. It's the October 1 numbers, so we're close. So when the October numbers come in, we will replace this with the October numbers. How about that? There you go.
Can we also include so most of the scenarios you based on, I think it was 25, 26 projected enrollment? Can we have those kind of a third column for enrollment in here and list them both?
Yes.
Okay, I think you touched on what I was just going to ask is looking at the since we're already looking at NASDAQ as our baseline for future, be nice to know, okay, this is what we have today, what's in 5 years, what's in 10 years. That's the timeframes, and maybe beyond that, we're looking at for renovations, so, or reconstruction.
Well, I mean, that goes to what Jim was saying earlier, if we want to, and Mark, if we want to look for future, like what's going to happen in 20 years? If our trajectory continues along the path, and it's been accurate, so do we want to look and say, like to your point before, it's like, for these next 15 years, we might look like this, but then phase 2 or phase 7, whatever it is, we're going to look different because we're going to even have less in our community.
You also want to decide which NASDAQ projections you're looking at and be consistent with it. One of the things that NASDAQ's been communicating over the last year and probably this coming year as well is that the pandemic's impact on the projections, and I mean, they have a whole preface statement that they now include about, give or take because of the pandemic. We're in some instances they've been very accurate, and in some instances they've been just off. So we may want to decide, like, okay, 2022, 23 NASDAQ projection, that's what we're going to use until we get to this stage of the project, or October 1, 2023, and then NASDAQ projections off that. Like it would help to have something to ground it and go from there.
That's a good point, and we can see anecdotally what COVID did, especially south of Route 1, right, with the waterfront homes and influx. So it's going to have an impact for sure. If there was a better way to parse out that data, I'd love to have it, but beyond building data, but a lot of those properties just changed hands. We do have census data, though, that I could look at having GIS extract. I know that Carol mentioned that, to see what the most recent is based on the ALCS, to see if we, households with children. So we could look at some heat mapping and what, the committee might be able to look at, so. Any other, Brian, did you have anything? Dave, any other?
I would just caution the committee in that, and Phil said at the beginning, those construction numbers are better used as relative than they are as actual. So, when 101 versus 93, that difference is probably going to stay about there. But the 93 is probably a lot more than 93 based on what we're seeing in the industry.
Yes, I would absolutely concur. I want to say it again, the numbers that are in here are really to help you compare options, not to identify the cost.
One thing I will add, just for levity to the committee too, so there's some new site options in there. And I think one of the things that needs to be brought into the conversation eventually is if you're going to go to a new site, we're just going to leave those buildings, right? that cost doesn't go away because it gets, once that building gets transferred to the town, now the town, once again, has to deal with it financially as well. So if you just abandon Curtis Corner, you abandon the existing high school, somebody's either going to demolish it, reuse it. And I say that because I work in Warwick, right? And I had, part of my job as a special project person was to deal with the 5 schools that they closed. And what happened to many of them is they ended up dilapidated, and we had to demo them, which devalued the site when we took pennies for the dollar on. Because affordable housing sounded really good. I looked at it for Aldrich, which was the middle school that was closed in Warwick. I brought in 5 developers, and it was a $10 million renovation cost, and no one could do it without the tax incentives, which take years to parse out. So that is coming from the town side, I have a concern that if it's a demolition, it would be nice to have that cost shared, as opposed to just transferred to the town where we're paying the full brunt of the cost. So I just think it's got to be part of the discussion as we get closer, and I'm not throwing any option off the table, but there's hidden costs in all these that sometimes you have to tether out because, penny wise, pound foolish type of mentality. So that's that. Anybody else? Phil, thank you. I mean, I know.
I think the only thing I want to say is that I'm very sensitive to delivering information and then having you ever to have to vote. So that's never my plan. So anytime you'll ever need to vote something, we'll certainly have information to you well in advance. But we are going to be on a little bit of an aggressive schedule, and I wanted you to get a good, solid start from the beginning. That's why we wanted to put this forward, give you some time to look at it, and we can have a good conversation about it next time we meet.
So Phil, could you make at least the adjustments on the reference schedule and update that, and then maybe get that back out to us so we can distribute it to the committee members and get it up? And does anyone see any harm of putting this out there on the website? So I'll upload that to the website, have it available so the public can view it and also consider it. And with that, we also have the public work session coming up on the 30th, I believe it is, which is a Saturday session. So that'd be a good point. I think that some of this stuff can be bantered about and discussed among the community. October 1st, I apologize. October 1st, it's a Saturday. Yeah, at the high school. So
When you post it, I think it's key that you put a disclaimer. This is all pre-decisional, this is, I don't want anybody jumping on there going, I can't believe they're gonna do X, Y, Z, because we're not anywhere near that right now. But I do appreciate everything Phil put out there, because it definitely gave us some good options.
anything else on this particular topic? No? So I will open it again to the topic, public comment. If you have any questions of Phil or with regards to the presentation itself. Anyone want to come up? Going once, going twice.
You can wait to the end.
I'll disconnect the video from.
Okay, so I have 2 things. The first is this. So when you project out, when you're in your school population forecast, when you project out to 2027, you come up with 703. Now, the problem with using that number, this is the way I'm looking at this, is this. RIDE So, yep, first of all, you have to, South Kingstown's losing this immense amount of population, right? So we're always looking at this as it's going down, it's going down, it's going down. But when RIDE came up with all these instructions on how to calculate all the things you need when you're building schools and fixing schools, they're doing it more either that it's going to stay that same amount of students or actually increase a little bit, because when you go back to what their instructions were, it says that that optimally a high school should be built to 85% of its capacity. So if you have 703 students, you divide that by 0.85, you come up with 825 students. Now, the reason I say that is this. In the research I did, when a new high school is opened up, you're going to get an increase in your enrollment. And I'm going to say this, if we build the right high school, I think we could see an amazing increase in enrollment here. That you would, my guess is that all the students that are, not to Chariho, because that's a different situation, but I'm thinking Narragansett, I'm thinking North Kingstown, even thinking some of the parochial schools, that when that building opens up, if it has contiguous, if it's a campus with the athletic facilities, it's going to be a draw to bring students back. So if you only design the school for 703 students, it's going to be small the day it opens up. I think we should check the RIDE numbers. What they're saying is you divide that number by 85, and that gives, so 85% would be 703, and 100% would be like 8.25. Because I think when I read about how much, just even if you didn't have all the students that we have out of district now, I think what I read was the average increase in enrollment in a new high school is like 11 to 15%, maybe even a little more, that you would get to come back. So you don't want to open the school up and it will already be bouncing against people. And the other thing is this. I'm hoping that if we wake up here and we look at our land use, how the way we're using land here in South Kingstown, that we can reverse this trend over the next 10 to 20 years. We'll reverse it so that our enrollments will increase again. So you don't want to build a high school now and then have to put a tens of $1 million addition on it in a decade. And the second thing was the number for a new high school on a new site seemed awfully low. $551 is the formula, current formula per square foot. All right, but if I did send you, I don't know if you guys, I'm hoping you looked at it. One of the emails I sent you had a direct link to the Massachusetts. When it opens up, you see this graphic. And on the graphic are all these squares, and it goes from, it's a timeline. It goes back, I don't know how many years, but then it's up to where we are now, like 2022, and then there's some 2023 things in there, and you'll see these little squares, and when you just take your cursor and just go on top of the square, you don't have to click it, you just go on top of the square, it opens up, and it'll tell you what that project is, how much money it was, how much money it's theoretically supposed to cost, and what the cost per square foot is. And the cost per square foot for the most recent projects in Massachusetts are $600 to $750, and there's even one, I can't remember the town, it's $800 a square foot. So the $550, we gotta take that, like Mr. Conley said, that'll be looked at again.
So, overall, I will say, well, one is Phil, population was mentioned, and these are relative numbers right now. So you're just basing it on a strict number, but no additional capacity, correct? For this analysis.
Right, but RIDE, the RIDE's gonna ask you to lock that number in. You have to lock that number in.
Understood, yeah. And so I think this goes, and to the second comment, this goes back to exactly what Dave said. These are to compare option to option, not look at quote-unquote real life, right? Because the 551 is not accurate representation of current market to build a school. So hopefully the updated numbers will be, but we don't know yet. But for relative terms, so I think that's an important thing to constantly reiterate as we put this out there. Like, these are not necessarily the numbers because they are low. So as discussions entail, once we put the presentation out there, you know, somebody's going to think, oh, brand new high school is $100 million. That's not true. So that's actually good feedback because that's how it may be perceived, and we need to be putting that out there in bold and italics. The other thing I meant to say, I have my note sheet, LEA. When we start talking about terms like LEA, nobody knows what LEA means. So we needed to define that in better terms of use plain language.
Can I suggest that we have either an acronym sheet or a, part of a FAQ, because LEA, FF&E, all of that stuff, absolutely, I agree 100%. FCI was one that somebody just asked the other day. And I agree, but at the same time, it's an education process too. So it's like we have this FAQ of this is what these words mean, but I also don't want it to stunt our process because this is how they talk. We need to learn how to talk.
Sure.
We need to know what we're talking about. So when someone asks me what FCI means, I need to know what that means, and I need to be able to educate the community. But yes, we need a FAQ, but I also wouldn't want us to change how we're talking because people might not understand it. We would just have a FAQ about it.
Sure. Whatever the committee thinks is the best way to do that, I know that we tend to talk in jargon to a lot of people, and I just want to make sure they're translating, because what happens is they don't receive on the other end, and they say, well, we never talked about that. Well, we did. You didn't understand what we were talking about. So to the point, we can use a footnote. What is an LEA, right? And then just use it consistently, making sure that we're defining those terms on this product that we put out would be my suggestion. And I think an FAQ is a good idea if anybody has, Phil, you might already have something on this because you've worked a lot of communities where you have a boilerplate of typical terms. If you could get that to me, I'll throw it on you. But we'll certainly get that up on the FAQ site so we're all talking the same language. FAQ. What's FAQ mean? All right. Yeah, right, exactly. All right. So was there anything else from the community? All three? Okay. Anything else from the committee before we move on? All right, then we'll move on. So next on our agenda is discussion and/or action regarding the Facility Condition Index, FCI, for Curtis Corner and Wakefield Elementary School. So I have not had a follow-up discussion with Mario. One of my questions was, so we talked about this last time. There is a bonus predicated on this 65% of condition index that if we exceed it, it would essentially make us eligible for another bonus. We didn't achieve that during the previous assessment by the Jacobs report. However, Mario Carino had said he felt strongly that we would qualify given the time and age and what he's seeing in the market. But this is a choice, not really even a choice of the committee, because I'll predicate this, it requires funding. And I've gone to this point of where I've asked Brian, where would we fund this? And the answer would probably be where we're funding Phil, which is from the school construction account, I believe. So that would require school committee action if they're going to fund it. Unless our buckets of money are fairly set at this point, I think, on the town side. And that's something Jim and I haven't had a chance to catch up on, so.
Can you clarify with Mario that you have to fund it, or if it is a deduction from housing aid?
Okay, that's a good point.
It might be a deduction from housing aid.
Oh, yeah, you iterated that.
On the document, that it's a deduction from housing aid.
Okay.
Don't straight up.
So, again, but so that would impact, so on the town side, we flow, my understanding, we're flowing everything to schools as far as what we receive in housing aid, it rolls over, so it still impacts schools. So that, obviously it would be a combined decision on whether we want to allocate those funds. My understanding, and the superintendent emailed me and gave me the sheet, it does say not to exceed. My understanding, and Kate, you're in there on the meeting, and so was Raquel and Brian, that the expectation was to be about $15,000 to do an FCI.
If we went out with Coventry, I think it was because it was a combined effort.
Yep. What I'm unclear on is will we have a backstop, let's say they get higher than expected proposals, are we obligated because we submitted this application to move forward? And Phil, you may even know this, or will we have a point to say, well, they came in at $45,000, do you want to move forward? And we say, whoa, that we could bring that back.
So my question really is, do we chase this? Because if we're only, there are like six bonuses, but we only qualify for X number. Even if we might qualify for this, we chase it, we might qualify for it, but we already may be maxed out before.
That's correct.
So the question is, do we bother?
So Phil, I know we're going to qualify for at least 3, I believe. So the question is, I think, the 4th. And can you chime in on what you think, from your perspective, we would be eligible for if we package this? And this is,
I agree that there are 3 that are highly probable: newer and fewer, the 21st century, and health and safety. I suspect no matter what projects you develop, you will gather those 3. It's going to be whether you can achieve anything from the 4th bonus, which is only really going to be half of that bonus because you'll reach your 17.5. So my concern with this chasing of the 4th bonus is to make sure that it is actually achievable and not offset because one of the buildings may already be closing. So I was unclear from the SBA on whether a school that you're closing, because it also had a high FCI, that you get both sets of bonuses. Do you know what I mean? Using one building for 2 bonuses. I mean, I know you're doing that in other places, but that was unclear to me. So I think there's a little bit more questions that I think you may want to investigate with the SBA before you would pull the trigger on this additional assessment that needs to be done by someone other than us. And they may have a pool of architects already for that assessment process.
so Phil, do we have any other bonus that you feel would qualify to get that 2.5%, right? If we're going to go chase this, it's because we want to be eligible. Do we have another option to get that reach that 2.5% benefit that you can see right now?
I don't think you have any overutilization within any of your buildings.
Right.
And I believe that is the 6th of the bonus categories. Newer and fewer, 21st century, health and safety, FCI, and utilization. I don't know if there's any more.
Green schools. Green schools.
Green schools. I believe any ones that are associated with energy or that would require you to start getting into renewables are going to probably be outside the funding abilities of this project.
So with that, it does sound like, because I need clarity, I know myself, and I can see you nodding heads here, that I think we need more clarity on, you know, what is the procedure, what is the expectation we qualify. You know, it's a risk reward, right? And it's not a substantial amount of money if it's going to reap the ultimate reward of 2.5%, which translates to possibly millions. But also, we don't want to do it if it's a nothing burger to start with, right? So, you know, so with that, I mean, we can certainly go back and maybe myself, superintendent, Jim, Kate, go back and see if we can have a quick meeting with Mario to clarify just this issue. Is that acceptable to committee? Yeah, make sure we don't have a quorum. We wouldn't with 4, right? So. Oh, well, we have 9. Okay, all right. So we'll get 3 together to have that discussion. I think we have some pointed questions that we can ask the SBA. Maybe we just iterate them in email form, so we have written. That's another way to approach it that would be simpler. We have documented. Mario's a busy person, so we can certainly, I'll pass those through the superintendent before we even send those out. So that way we're capturing all questions. Anything else on this issue? Okay. Anything from the public on this specific issue? Utility condition index? All right. Then we'll move on. So we'll move on to number 7, which is discussion or action on public communication activities. I think this was related really to what Kate had already put out, which we just received. So unless anybody has any discussion on that topic, I'll move on to the next. All right. General public comment. Does anybody have any general public comment relative to what we've discussed tonight? No? All right. So I'll move on to scheduling the next meeting. So one of the things I noticed.
Can I interrupt you?
That's okay, yeah.
The discussion and or action on public and communication activities. Are we not going to talk about that?
I just did.
No, but I mean, as far, I thought we were going to get a little.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I'll back up. I apologize.
Thank you.
I got that conflated with. I just got back from Ohio. Did I mention
It's
that?
all right. It's all right.
Must be the plane ride. So actually, that was more of the community activities to the broader, right? Community outreach and engagement. So we probably should touch upon that. I apologize. So we're continuing to try to engage the public. We have a couple members here from the public, but one of the things that Kate and I spoke about today is how do we cast the net a little wider. We obviously have only a certain amount of capacity. We all work, and it, you know, it falls on the committee mostly to get a lot of activities done, including the day-to-day. But I'm certainly looking for ways that we might be able to engage the public and get them a little more participation. So, Chip?
So we have our showcase night coming up on November 1st. And so it's an opportunity for people to see our school and think about attending our current school. I was thinking that it might be nice to have representation about the school building project at that event.
Okay.
It's a 6 p.m. on November 1st, and so it might be nice for us to have to show off what we're doing at that particular time, and having meeting dates and other ways for people to get engaged. And so there'll be people, hopefully lots of people coming through the building for a variety of reasons, and it might be nice to kind of have that available for people to see.
So that's November 1st, you said? So we're going to be a little bit more progressive at that point, which is a good thing, right?
I agree.
Phil, I'll point at you. I know you've done this, right? We did a lot of this. Some sort of presentation that collapse presentation on activities and sort of the process? Would that be something you could help support for that event?
Yeah, and I'm thinking something like people could go and it could be in one of the rooms where lots of things going on, and people can stop by and ask questions, but I definitely would want to have it in a prominent place so that people are seeing that this is going on, beyond just emails that we're sending home that are saying, hey, we're doing this again, in a good way, like not in a negative way. I mean, this is happening. You're not hearing old news where the school building committee is meeting and we're looking for lots of public support and input.
So one of the things that Phil had helped me out in Coventry, not to throw you under the bus, Phil, because you did a lot for the money, but had made up some boards that we could take to the schools during events, just like that. We'd set up a table and essentially, hey, here's what's going on, and here's how to get information. And it was relatively low cost, or I think you provided at no cost at that point. But it was very effective to get parents engaged and at least make them aware of projects. So that, I mean, Phil, do you think that's something, I don't know what our scope is, to be honest, with your contract, but, or we could. Okay. So would that be helpful?
Yes, I think so. I don't think we want to sit. We have to decide whether we want to have that set up near the compassion dog or away from, because that may either distract or attract people to that. Yeah.
Put the compassion dog right in front of it, right?
Yeah.
You can only pet the dog if you read this board.
Even before that, though, obviously November 1st, that's wonderful, but we have a couple community forums coming before that, or we have one anyway. Chip, I only get the high school information because I only have a high schooler now, and you do a really good job of making sure that every time you communicate with us, we receive that. I can't speak for the other principals. I'm not sure what they're doing at the moment, but I'm assuming we could have some sort of like, it can sit in their newsletters that they send out every week. Just like and we had discussed, like, even if it's just like the same blurb that's just shared over and over and over again, just so that it's in people's faces. And I would also call out to the town council, because this is not just a school committee project. It is certainly not a school committee project. This is a town project. So I would like to think the town council would get in on this as well.
Clarifying question. What are the entities in the community? What are the entities in the community? Do you have, in the community, do we have a clergy organization that meets on a regular basis? Do we have the Chamber of Commerce? Like, what are those entities?
So I actually have, if I still have it, access to it, I have a list of our previous run at this, a list of, and it's not just PTOs, but Boy Scout troops, religious institutions, community centers, the whole 9 yards that we could get flyers out to.
So there's flyers, but there's also digestible information, right? And we've got a lot of information that we're generating. Somehow, somebody, I'm someone, not somebody, just want to say that right now. Somebody can put that information in some form of digestible information and keep updating those entities, whether it's in person, whether it's online, whether it's inviting them here, whether it's going to them and doing some sort of reasonable timed roundtable discussion around some item in the process. The likelihood of everyone coming here is probably can be successful, but probably may not be successful. Maybe the 7, 8, 9 we're going to get is the 7, 8, 9 we're going to get. But if we can get on their agendas and go to their meetings and put this out in front of them in a reasonable amount of time and get their feedback, I think that might be a way of generating some community buy-in, but also different perspective, different views. So something to consider.
No, I think it's a great idea. I always struggle on who's the somebody, right? Because somebody's got to do the lift. And so, this is what I always encountered in my previous stint as a chair, is like, it always fell on me, and I did a lot, but eventually it had to be distributed. So we created some subcommittees just on this topic. I think for an agenda item, what we could do is work on that list, like take your base list and then brainstorm quickly, and then figure out where we could meet them where they are. So if they're having meetings, and then maybe distribute that load somehow, some way, to where we could, have a initial pre-baked presentation, but then also set the stage up. Here's where you're going to get your further information. So you go to a chamber meeting, right? Joe Bealy is, running that organization. It's very easy for us to attend one of their meetings and then say, here's the initial startup. By the way, if you want to continue to be informed, here's the point. And then we can it's their responsibility then to get the information. We're not having to go and spoon feed every organization. It's a suggestion, but maybe something. So we could certainly put that on the agenda, get that list. I think it's a great point. Like, who are the people we're trying to get? Young, old, in school, out of school, because we have a lot of different demographics throughout the community, and we have to be mindful that this is a community project. So.
Is there an excuse me, it's been a long day. Is there an upcoming Oktoberfest event?
There is.
The day of our community forum.
But no. I'm just thinking that if there's an event around that could be an opportunity also. I mean, that's very quickly, that's very soon. But that could be an opportunity also. I mean, is there a restaurant organization outside of the chamber that also could be an opportunity? So we just got to strategize around, what is it we want to give, and what's our elevator speech? What's our 15-minute elevator pitch? Because folks are going to drone out after that, right? Like, let's be honest. School building committee is not as sexy as we all like to make it out to be, right?
Right.
Oh, I'm not speaking for everybody. This is a personal. That doesn't surprise me. but in all seriousness, like if they're going to lock in for 15 minutes, then what's our hit, right? And then, here's where you can find additional information. So maybe there's someone out there who's got some expertise in marketing and they want to volunteer, to help us out so we're successful with this campaign. That's also something to consider.
No, that's a good point. I think actually, Phil, this is our point again, because, we're going to hope for that marketing person, but right now, I know you've done this. Is it reasonable to get something that we could put at the event on October 1st to have a board that we could work on, or a flyer? I could work on it with you.
Flyers, no problem. What is the message? Is the message just to get involved?
Exactly.
You want to be mindful that we haven't done anything yet other than start to have these discussions. So is that the message, to get involved or to be aware?
So my initial would be, we're out there. We're doing this, right? A lot of people don't know we exist yet. We're assuming they know we exist because we went to council and we got indoctrinated, right? But most people don't even know this is going on, would be my bet. So I think the first step is, we're out there, we're doing this. If you want more information, here's where to find it, which we've already said. The website would be our clearinghouse for that. That's my thinking, but I'll kick it to the committee for their thoughts.
I kind of concur with that, and the problem being October 1st is our first community forum from 9 to 11, and then the Oktoberfest is October 1st on Main Street. They're good piggybacking off of each other for sure, and that could be a way to say, but we want people to come to the community forum as well. So, and again, what are they coming to see at the community forum? I panicked a little. I didn't sleep very well last night because I was like, October 1st is not that long away, and I didn't realize it until I started going through my calendar for, sorting my life out, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's only like a week or two. So
People tend to park in our lots anyway for that event. I'm just wondering if we should offer it to the community as like free parking. Come and see this, attend the Oktoberfest, and put out to people that like you're going to park there anyway. So just kind of get it in front of us like it's free parking at our high school, and we're also having this event before the Oktoberfest really gets started. How we get that out there is the question, but I think I mean, it would be easy enough to do for us to put it in a building use and say that these lots are going to be open.
What time does it start? Is it
Is this like the timeshare,
just one more minute?
I think that crowd's gonna be very focused on where they go.
I agree with that, but I do think that they're already parked there anyway, so it's kind of
Yeah. I think unless there's a free keg in there, we're going to lose that crowd pretty quickly.
What time is the
Yeah, I would gander to say it probably starts after 12, but. So Phil, I think the general direction would be basic at this point, right? We want to let people know we're there and where to access the information. That's it. And then that's something, if we can put that like in the windows of Main Street, right? People at least know we're there and we're making due effort. And then, we'll continue to build, but I think it's a start.
So the Oktoberfest starts at noon.
Okay, well, there you go. They can come right out and head right up to Main Street.
Park here, come see a show.
I don't know about others, but I'll take advantage of that. All right. The other thing I think I talked about before is, flyers are not super effective, but meeting people where they're at, the supermarket, when they're doing their shopping on Main Street, if there's any ideas that we can do beyond the flyer to engage the businesses and get the word out, I think might be something that would be helpful.
I'd say, Commerce, American Legion, VFW, we could also hit the planning board, the zoning board, all these other community groups that come together. We could just get 5 minutes. And I had a rec commission meeting last night, twice ago last week, and that's how we just committees cross-pollinate.
That's a good point. We have a lot of committees here. So that would be one. Yeah. I actually staff the BPAC, so they are well aware of this process, but there's a lot of boards and commissions who are not. So that's something we can definitely put out. We have all the information for them. Anything else on this specific topic right now? So just so you know, I am updating the website with the meetings. I would like, if anybody has any FAQs, thoughts on questions and answers that they'd like to send me, it would be really helpful. And I can certainly get those up pretty easy, but it helps cut down the time on me having to think of all the questions and predicteds. And we'll also add, as we get questions from the emails and whatnot, we can add those as FAQs. But, the intent is to build out the website to be a little bit more robust than it was. It's going to take some time, but as we get information, putting it in a digestible format. So.
One suggestion, couple other areas we could look to hit with our schedule and possibly the website, keep it straightforward so it can get out to more eyes. Local newspapers, if they're willing to put it in or put a small blurb about what our mission is here. The school committee and town council also, we willing to share that out because there might be someone at home that doesn't, know what we're doing currently, and they can go to the website and see, or find our schedule.
Just so everyone knows, I have included the council and all school committee members on the meeting, like when the agendas go out and you see it's blind copied. That's blind copied to council, school committee, and the building committee, just so everyone's aware of when the meetings are posted. The idea is that hopefully those elected leaders will share that information. That's my hope. Oh, that's good. Good. The last thing, what's that? The last thing I'll say on this is I did just come back from the ICMA conference, the International City County Managers Association, and a lot of the sessions are focused on civic engagement. This is not a new topic, but certainly a focus. And so some of the new tools that are available, and some are very, very low cost and no cost. For instance, I was in a session and they did poll questions. And I logged in, I put in the code, and real live time we could see all the polling data go right up on the screen. Now, Phil has actually used this, because we used this in my last process when we had options. He used the polling app. The committee members only weighed in on this, but essentially, as we were looking at it, it was a great way to kind of have that data without everybody saying, oh, I like this, I like that. And it was very impactful to see the numbers very quickly show up on the screen. So it's something that we may want to talk about as options do roll out. This technology is out there. I mean, it obviously opens you up to risk, right? You know, it's only certain people are paying attention and they have their agenda and want to put in. But it's certainly powerful to have the community weigh in a very quick manner. So I was pretty impressed. There's some really great technology for civic engagement out there. Oh, yeah. I mean, that's for teaching, that's probably great. And it's a lot of these are no cost, so it's not going to really hurt us on the project end. All right. Anything else on that topic before I move on? Kate? Yeah, we're running out. Yep. So if there's nothing else on that topic, that's okay. Well, so I'm going to give you 3 minutes, Doral, to say whatever is on your mind here. But after that, I got to close out the meeting. We got to talk about the schedule of the next meeting and adjournment. So.
There's 2 pages for each person. All right, so I did more research into Mr. Mazinger's earlier this year when he proposed a $300 million bond for additional monies for schools construction. It passed the Senate. It never got out of the House Finance Committee. They held it for further study. So with that went the bonus for the 10% bonus for building a new green high school to the zero emissions thing that we may have been able to have, and a couple others. There's one in there for minority hiring and hiring construction companies from Rhode Island, which is great if you hire, what's the big one here? Construction. Rhode Island. Nobody? The big construction company, the one that did East Providence.
That was Gilbane.
Okay. All right, so anyway, so I also sent an email to I sent an email to Representative Potter, who was the sponsor in the House, and also the President of the Senate, because he was one of the co-sponsors of that legislation in the Senate, and I'm asking him what the heck happened to it, and whether or not they're going to resurrect it in January. Maybe they held it because with the inflation and everything, they decided not to put it on with the referendum this year. Going to do it separately next year, hopefully, but we don't know. All right, so having said that, I think your committee should increase by at least 1 member going forward through this stage 2 process, and that would be your director of athletics. Just so you get his input on the fields. The CTE programs, we get almost nobody from out of town to come to our CTE programs. So that's another thing that if you build the facilities, and they're great facilities, then the likelihood is you'll attract students here. When I looked at all the CTE programs in the state earlier this year, there's not a single CTE program for firefighter. which is interesting because South Kingstown, over by where the Union Fire District offices are, we have the building that they use to train firefighters in how to go into buildings and do that stuff. We also have a really robust volunteer fire department system here in the town, including up where I live in Kingston, the Kingston Fire District, which is separate, but there are wonderful students up there. They're all EMT qualified, and it'd be a good way to maybe wrap that into your program.
Hey, Doral, you're making some good points, but in about 30 seconds, okay?
Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the YMCA parcel and why I'm so adamant about at least looking at it. It's this. It's because you don't. It's the only piece of property. If you could get the Greater Providence YMCA to consider selling that, a portion of that to us, you'd be able to put a high school there. Now, it's contiguous to Old Mountain Field, that 80 acres, and it's also contiguous to 150 acres of the Broad Rock School, and those are athletic fields. So the only thing it really lacks is a track in a football stadium. Now, the problem with keeping it at Columbia Street is when we looked at it in the prior iteration, I think when they looked at it was the only way you could put a track in a football field there. Well, first of all, it couldn't be an 8-lane track. It would have to be probably a 6-lane track. But you would have to get the apartment building that's on School Street to relocate, because you need that little. They cut out a little corner of where the hazard field is. Of course, you got to get used to the hazard field. So we need all of that stuff to put an athletic facility there, as far as I know. And then you run into the issue of parking. And I know the Noble doesn't want people to park there on Friday night when you're having a football game. All right, so anyway, I put out 30 seconds. Here's what I'm asking. Instead of just out of hand saying, no, we're not going to even consider it, I'm offering this to you all. Now, the YMCA closes on the weekends, because I'm a member. Closes at noon time on the weekends. So, what I propose is to go meet there on a Saturday afternoon, and I will take you up the path from the parking lot down there by the Old Mountain Field tennis courts. There's these incredible paths that wind up the mountain.
All right.
We're going to go right past both.
Yeah, have you behind me on this. That's it. I heard he gave you way more than 3 minutes, I already promised. So the proposal I see in front of us is to move the site, right? I think we're registering that. I think, what I know is at this point, we're not quite to the stage of walking any site yet until we look at some of the framework options, right? You're about 3 or 4 steps ahead of us. But I would say this, we have an upcoming workshop that you can have much more explanation provided on this, and this is going out to the committee members as part of your communication for them to chew on, and we can certainly bring it back. But I think you've communicated that.
I'm just asking, don't just say no.
I don't think we are. And I think what we're telling you is we hear you loud and clear, and we're registering. Nothing's thrown out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Doral. All right, so we'll move on to the last item, which is scheduling the next meeting. So when we scheduled our workshop, we didn't have a meeting next week. And I guess with Phil, we had given him 2 weeks, a week ago. My question is, do we want to add a meeting next week to go ahead and continue our discussion and also have discussion about the work session, about what's going to be presented and stuff? So or either that Wednesday or Thursday. I know that's an add to our master schedule, but my recommendation would be yes, but it's up to the committee.
So Thursday is the open house at the high school.
That's not good.
And Tuesday is school committee meeting, and an open house
Days
is council.
council. We got, Wednesday would be the only option if we wanted to do it. Needs a day off. Well, there's that. All right, so,
Well, so it brings us to October 1st being our first forum.
so the question becomes, and we didn't have this on tonight, but what are we presenting at that forum? If, you know, and so. And Phil, you obviously need some direction. I'm assuming for that community forum, we're going to have a.
Might I suggest we reschedule the community forum?
So I think it was more of a public input. It wasn't so much of a charrette as presenting kind of what we have and allowing response, but we don't have, I don't know if we have the content. So, Phil?
Want to caution the committee. We have an agenda, we have a posted agenda. Let's be careful that we don't stray too far off the path.
I think this was scheduling next meeting, because
Yeah.
technically that is our next meeting.
Again, just want to caution the committee.
So, stick to the barriers here, but.
Sure.
Want me to add it to the agenda? I can make a motion. Kate, what do you? Want to make a motion real quick?
Make a motion to add
The wisest thing to do.
the
Discussion
discussion of the community forum.
I second the motion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, Phil, go ahead.
So this first initial forum, I always thought, was going to be really giving the community an opportunity to bring forward some ideas they may have that are surfacing, present some of the scenarios that the committee has been developing, and then really structure a dialogue, really. Because we have no content other than these scenarios that have some parameters for discussion. And that was my intent. I thought of it more as a dialogue, as a workshop, not a robust presentation that they would react to. I think there would be some kind of agenda that we could develop together and then have the event.
So how does the committee feel like about that? Do we want to stick with the date and at least have the start of the discussion?
So Doral could come forward with his idea in a robust discussion. We have what I feel what you presented tonight is also something that it can just be I mean, we presented it tonight, but my guess is not too many people were watching. You know, so here it is again in the community, and if community wants to come forward with other ideas.
So if there's none in opposition, we'll hold the date. And we'll stick with the track of general information and allow people to weigh in. And then we'll count on you, Phil, to kind of guide some of the conversation at the beginning. We'll do a brief presentation and then open up to community comment and forum. Good? All right, done. You're going to be at Oktoberfest, right?
So we have the forum on the 1st from 9 to 11 at the high school, and then we have our next meeting here, October 6th, 6 to 8.
Which is pre-scheduled on the agenda, so We're good there. All right, so we're good there. I'll take a motion to adjourn. Can I get a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. Have a good night.